Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I am the player who plays as the King Under the Mountain, and I'm going to pretty much go through a end of season review today, I think, even though there is still a few hours left in this server, about 32 hours-ish left, plus then the day or so that you get afterwards. It's a server with Yudes and Gods and Illil and Dobie and Det and of course Sella, who are very little mentioned in all this, but have also been pretty good and they've grown pretty well throughout the season. Plus as well Hack and a few others in the South, SPRT. I'll probably get to all that when I show the map. There's a lot that's gone on since the last update that I did. Lots of things have changed hands. Lots of keeps have changed hands. The season itself is pretty dead at this point, I would suggest. I don't think there's a great deal more to do. So we'll kind of just go through what happened and sort of close out the season. Won't get into too many things politically. There may be some sarcasm thrown around just because it's needed. And we'll also talk about the updates to the Merit Store, which are pretty cool. And I will probably start there, actually, because I know if I ramble on too much, people won't actually listen. So there's a few things that they've tried to do lately. One, there is another PBE coming into the game. So again, there's some hesitation around gear changes and things like that. Generally, with this game, when they give you something good, they tend to give you something that's also not so good. So we're going to start with the good and see what happens. In tomorrow's update, I think it is, Fellowship Fortresses, which are in someone else's land, they've actually listened to people. So they're going to go from 24 hours to make, if you're the enemy, to 12 hours, which I think is pretty reasonable, to be honest. So that's good. And then they've made some really cool adjustments to the Merit Store, which are still that you get all these gubbins, which I'll probably just collect while I'm in here in a minute. They've also added on some heals, which is pretty good, because if you're getting a lot of merit, you do need a lot of heals, and they refresh every day, so that's pretty handy. It's going to save you some gems. These three items are still the same, but the one that is probably the most useful, and what people have been crying out for ages, and it does scare me that we're talking about putting these in the Merit Store, because that tends to mean, I think, with the PBE, there's going to be some gear changes that we need to all address. But for now, let's just be happy that it's here, and you can have an Elven Craftsman's Hammer. Now, this is a fantastic introduction. Everyone's been crying out for these things. I'm just going to say a few very, very sort of short points on it. One, why they locked them into being season-specific, I don't know, but at least they're in there, so fair enough. Two, I think there'll be a lot of people like me who have done things like this with their gear. So if I go into some of these pieces, I've basically killed a load of gear because I was only getting 2 hammers a season from the end of season shop. So if I didn't do that, my gear changes were very limited to probably taking 4 or 5 seasons. I hope they do something to address the fact that people have now got a lot of worn gear that they wouldn't have had if they knew that they were going to introduce these hammers into the shop. So I think that's something that they will take into consideration from the sort of brief points I've had with customer services and people like that. It does seem they may try and address something in that when they've gone through the new PPE, which I think is quite exciting if it works out that we start looking at troop commanders in a different way. But then if that is the case, everyone's gear is going to need to change, so there's going to have to be some kind of exchange event or more hammers or give you back the worn equipments that you didn't think were ever going to be any use ever again that you've then created. That's my point on those hammers. I have used the 2 hammers from this store to kind of work on a couple of gear pieces. So it was to complete that piece there and to kind of create a bit of a Skullhelm set as a sort of reserve set. So the armor that I use for Sauron and the helmet that I use for Sauron with this and this, it kind of makes quite a cool initiative set for my Skullhelm. So something that I might try and play around with next season. It is a work in progress. I do still have all the Blazing Tongues waiting for when the Balrog finally appears, shall we say. But for now, that was that. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that before I went into the season. I've probably done that the wrong way around, but it's been, I don't know, a long, long time. So Let's go for the map, which I don't think there'll be any pins on anymore that anyone can't see. So this is the current pin. It's kind of one of those end of season, everything's irrelevant kind of pins where there's a crossing changing hands and people are getting bored. So that's that. There's a small pin in Amon Lank, which isn't going to mean anything because there is a ring war that's already happened and they've already promised each other that they're not going to do anything too drastic around that. And with 24-hour fell forts, it's not like anyone can surprise anyone anyway. Talking through the kingdoms, so this is the Adobe Deck Kingdom. This is the Gods and Ilil Kingdom. This is Hack and someone else whose their name always escapes me. I really apologise. This is Yudes and Sela. And down here you've got, I think it was SBRT and Avalon in the end, who have got this sort of small kingdom where they've been at it for days and days and days now. Down here fighting these three. So fair play to them with the pins. So since the last video that I did, we owned the ring at the time. We knew we weren't going to keep it because of what was happening. We did get to a point whereby we had lost all this area here. So this was Undeeps that we used to own. We got pushed out, long story short, by Yudes and Gods who wanted a fair ring war between themselves because a 1v1v1 didn't work. And by the sounds of things, they just didn't like the fact that we took the ring without talking to anyone, which is by the by at this stage and amazing. So we kind of got pushed into Brownlands over here. We held Gods there. Both parties kind of got a little bit like, oh, this is a bit boring because Yudes were basically just taking all the territories here without any contest whatsoever because we focused God's Kingdom. Gods couldn't get us out of here to create this fair ring war. So in the end, when the timer come up, they just pretty much went and did the ring war anyway after Yudes had took this capital down here and all these lands. So they got down as far as Argonath and into Em Mule. So we've kind of took all those places back in the last 2 or 3 days since the ring war. The ring war itself was kind of, a fairly fitting way to end the season for most people. I think it got a 50-odd million pin. It lasted about 12 hours. So yeah, it wasn't a bad ring war, I don't think, as far as we go. I think everyone there enjoyed themselves. Perhaps they may have enjoyed themselves more if the season wasn't over 2 weeks before and they'd stopped fighting 2 weeks before, but hey ho, everyone lives and learns, I think, is probably the key behind that, and that's what's been said by other people. But the ring war itself sounds like it was quite fun for people, so we were never going to get the ring back from that point. We have moved back as pretty much as far as we can, so I'm at this crossing here, which we took back. I will go to this pin. So mindlessly for the last few days, and it has been pretty mindless, to be honest. People have just been sitting on this crossing here or on this crossing here, and then dying and rinse repeat. And then I'll show you what I mean by the fact that I don't think anything was ever going to happen between these two. So you've got Yudes here, you've got Gods here, and they're basically just swapping the crossing over. As soon as it looked like we may go back towards the Undeeps and try and contest again after the ring was taken, they kind of both camped here, and I think everyone shook hands to a degree and just sat there. So we've just been sending it this crossing. I'll go through the leaderboards at that stage. We were down as far as 30th, but it was back to that kind of point that I made the other day where if you're good at rotating tiles, you can always stay around the top 30 or pick some tiles back up, which is really important, to be honest, because when we were fighting, we were losing a lot of land from Yudes, who were sort of not just going through the lands and taking the keeps, but they were sort of taking the tiles and deleting the tiles. So there was a lot of free 200s at one stage. They basically just crippled our economy to try and fight against Gods because we weren't fighting Yudes, which is fair. If that's a tactic you want to play, that's fine. We've done that before to people in these situations, so it is what it is. We were down as far as, I think, 5th in here. We've sort of taken back over Sela. Yudes and Gods had a massive production bonus in the end. Like I say, they sort of farmed a lot of our territories, really, and already had a lot behind them. As far as contribution goes, it's a pretty close fight for second, and it's not too far a fight off first. I know that Raven went on holiday for a few days, so it allowed us to catch up a little bit. It's pretty tight at the top for the top three. I hope to finish second, but as a guarantee, I'll finish third in merit, which, to be fair, it's a good season considering there's some fantastic accounts, and to kind of get this much against such good teams as Gods and Ilil and Yudes and Sella. It's been pretty hard fought to get to that point, I would say. There's been a few weeks where I've got over 1 million merit. This is obviously reset this week, so I'm at about 106,000 currently. My aim, if I've got enough time, so there's 31 hours left, and it is mindless violence at this point. You know, you're not getting anywhere, so there's not really much incentive for people to sort of fight, really. I'm at 7.7. I would like to get that to 8, as last season, from memory, I think I finished on about 7.8. 7.8. So I should surpass that, to be fair, but I would really like to get to 8 million, if at all possible. But we'll see how that goes. I've just done the first giveaway results and sort of the prize winners, so that video should be released pretty shortly. Sort of vague thoughts on the season. It's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of fighting. I think there's still a lot of people who think that the season was kind of curtailed a little bit early by the alliance between Gods and Yude's Kingdom in regards to Dol Guldur and making sure that they had their ring battle for it, because that was kind of decided quite early in July. So with probably 20 odd days left in the server, that was decided, and they kind of stopped fighting, which, I don't know, maybe that decision could have been made a little bit later, perhaps, and kept the server alive a little bit better, because I know a lot of parties from all sides haven't been overly happy with sort of the way things have turned out, because Yudes didn't fight much apart from against themselves for over a week or so, and Gods couldn't ever really prepare properly for the ring war because we were sort of fighting them all the time. So I don't know, there's probably a better way of doing it, but as far as Dol Guldur itself goes, I think it needs more than 3 entrances. I think a 4th entrance would be a better idea, or even 2 entrances, sort of an even number of entrances. I think it'd probably be the best idea for Dol Guldur. And maybe a couple more options for Felforts, because with only being the 2, it's very difficult to kind of create, particularly with an odd number of kingdoms, a sort of ring style fight, which I don't think coming into the season anyone necessarily wanted. And it was kind of spoken about that the season would try and be as sort of natural as it could be. But I don't really want to get too far into the politics, because I think pretty much everything's been said, and the community is too small now, and people just, I don't know, people just won't agree, so there's not really much point in chatting it through in that regard. I think some lessons have been made. I'm likely to die in a minute on here, because this minus 10% buff seems to mean that I die completely regularly to Sauron, which seems to happen all the time now. So as you can see, Yudes and Gods are all attacking the cross at the same time. So what happens in this situation is we'll occupy it first unless we get removed by Gods, and then we'll end up fighting Yudes after we've occupied, and then God's going to attack it again. Kind of a weird mechanic, but it basically meant that we were never going to get through this crossing because someone was always going to take us out, meaning we could never get anywhere near the centre again, really. So that was kind of that. There isn't really a great deal more to say. Like I say, it's been a good season. I think everyone's a little bit tired at this point. We are going to jump straight back in, I believe, to another season, with a small break in Bag End. I'm still absolutely mortified that my gear pulls this morning from from the Middle Earth packs, which are actually really good packs, by the way, because you get to choose your slot on sort of 6 of the items. So they're worth picking up, in my opinion. The issue was, I'm pretty sure I got 3 Lothlorien belts, 2 Calabashes, and something else that was completely irrelevant. So there is a Palantir in there as an option. It was clearly never going to give me that Palantir, which is a bit of a shame, really. So I was a bit grumpy about that this morning, I'll be honest. However, we recover, and it's allowed me to increase that beautiful smoking pipe on Scal. So Scal now is actually going to have a pretty decent gear set with these two. I'm probably going to run her next season just to see how she gets on, and then probably with these 2 items. So she's got the agility, just to make sure that these Nazgul skills, that is not Nazgul skills, I'm on the wrong commander, so that these skills like Nazgul and Execution and things like that all hit before White Council, because the agility will be quite high, because I'll have 2 different agility sets plus some more agility from the equipment. And Scal's initiative is pretty high anyway, so likelihood is that it'll hit before White Council, and then she can sort of deal the maximum amount of damage. So that'll be quite fun. Looking forward to using her a little bit, and hopefully I'll pick up a couple more bits and bobs for her to sort of keep going. I know she needs serious investment. I would argue I could probably also use that set on someone like a Saruman, which would be pretty cool. I do like a Battle Saruman, so I'm also going to toy with, I think, in Bag End, building a decent Frodo set, because I'd quite like to run Frodo just as something a bit different to Sauron for a season, and just maybe test it out. Like I say, I've managed to refine that gear piece now. I just can't get any more Palantir, so bit of a problem in that regard. And my Gandalf gear is still the same. Anyone who has tried to use this function here, it is awful at the minute. I hope it does work out okay in the end, but it basically, you can filter it a little bit better, so you can go onto the gear options, and you can filter, say, Flawless, and you could filter, say, Siege Ladder, as this is Gil, and then when you press Quick Equip, from my memory, it gives him a full Siege set, which is pretty handy in itself, but when you try and do it for something that isn't quite as Elf Siege, it doesn't work very well. So if I try and do it on Shadow, for example, it sort of brings up a lot of purple stuff, which isn't even strengthened. So they've kind of tried to put in a good feature. I hope they develop it further. I hope basically they just say, hi, here's 4 items. I want to drop them in on this slot. Press Quick Equip, and it happens. That'd be nice if we got that far. Like I said, I was going to die here. We did take down a couple of people on the way, but yeah, I was always going to die there. Just trying to get some merit, like I say. So, all in all, it's been a good season. The map probably looks as a lot more even than it's actually been in the end. I think if we're being brutally honest, whether all the kingdoms kind of felt this way or not, it's debatable, but we kind of felt it early on. Huge were always the most strong kingdom, and Cellar adding to them was definitely something that it's always been the most. They've just been the most powerful kingdom. Gods and us have been pretty close, to be honest, and it's been fun working with Det. So it's something that I think we'd like to do in the future. But I think they're going to find their own way for a season or so first. But all in all, a lot of fun. As always, the game's been a lot of fun lately. I do recommend, if you haven't picked up the game for a while, to maybe give it a try and maybe enter the PBE. I think it's really important, this PBE, that people do enter and pass comment on it, because there was plenty of people who didn't enter any of the sort of 2.0 PBEs who perhaps would have liked to have passed comment on it, and I think they missed out thinking it would never happen. So I do recommend as many people as possible get into it, just to try and get the game back to something like an experience that everyone wants to play. I've really enjoyed playing the game lately. There's been some really good updates in recent times, so I think getting everyone back to it would be nice. I mean, you're not going to have it always, and not everyone's going to be happy all the time, but I think as best you can, it'd be nice. This sort of fort feature with troops is really good, but I'll just reinforce from my base here because I've got loads of time to wait and no one's trying to reinforcement snipe, thankfully. So that's kind of all I've got time for, really. So that was probably the last thing I'll do in this season. Like I say, I do recommend you pick up the packs, the Middle Earth ones, because they are pretty good. And if you are just coming out of a season, you'll have enough gems to go back into the bag end and get the Strife of the Herd, for example. So in theory, for getting all the packs, you'll get 10 gold items, which I don't think the game's done much better about value than that for the price for a very long time. So I do recommend that. On the side of that, I do recommend you use the top-up link of mine, which would be really nice, which I've dropped in the description. And to be fair, the top-up link did really well last month. It kind of does humble me that people use it to that amount, and sort of I really do appreciate it. It does help me do this. It does help me give more things away to the community. So kind of a little thank you there. But as always, if in doubt, always follow your nose.